Hello, my name is Michael Vinsel. Today I'm continuing reading chapter 9 today of my book Travels with Nobody. All right, and so yesterday I just finished chapter 8. So today is Saturday, May 4th, 2024, and anyway, so here we go. I'm gonna have some coffee. Okay, Chapter 9, Arizona. Humphreys Peak. I remember the shape of the mountain. It had a distinct triangular patch of snow at the top. It was indeed more like the Rocky Mountains than what I had expected Arizona to be. I had chosen this route because I had thought it would not be snowy. But just before Flagstaff, the elevation sign had said more than 7,000 feet above sea level. It was cold. Now I knew. I had breakfast somewhere and got back on I-40. The sign said that I was in the Coconino National Forest. I knew that the Grand Canyon was just north of where I was. But I didn't want to try to go there. I knew that the distances in real life were much greater than they appeared on my map. I just wanted to get to California at this point, to Matthew's house. The forest had a western look about it. Big, coarse-needled pine trees with scaly bark, widely spaced with no undergrowth, just dried yellow grass blowing in the wind. Sometimes I could see patches of black on a tree trunk. This was one of those forest types that evolved with and depended on fires sweeping through periodically, I surmised. I would learn later that these were ponderosa pines. The smaller trees were lodgepole pines. They were called lodgepole pines because that is what the Indians of the plains had used for their teepees. I had learned that in school. At the elevation of the highway, there was no snow, but as I drove, the snow on the mountains in the distance was beautiful, gleaming white against the dark blue sky. Yes, the sky seemed darker than I had known back east. Was that because of the elevation? That view passed further and further behind me until I could only see those mountains in the rearview mirror. Through the spokes of my bicycle wheel. For some reason, I remember that view. With Flagstaff behind me, the land became desolate again. The trees shorter, juniper and pinyon pines, the sky clear and blue. Many miles would go by with hardly a house to be seen. I remember seeing houses far from the road, all alone. Did people actually live in those places? What would life be like in a place like that? I wondered. I hoped I would never come to live in such a place. As much as I appreciated solitude and the beauty of nature, this kind of solitude would be dangerous, I thought, at least to me. I kept driving as the sun arched overhead until I had to use the visor against the glare. Then the sun set. No clouds, no haze, no humidity, just the sun cleanly descending below the so distant horizon, leaving a thin golden line, which faded to orange, then disappeared. I passed the exit for Kingman. I remembered the song, Route 66. After Kingman would be Barstow, but for now, just Kingman, Arizona. I thought I was getting close to the California state line, but the hours went by. This was a lonely stretch of road. There were no lights, not even in the distance, and it was all the darker with only the one headlight. But then the moon rose. Then I saw a car up ahead, parked by the side of the highway. It was a police car. I knew he was going to stop me. I should have fixed the light, but I hadn't. I had started in the morning just kept driving. Anyway, Anyway, sure enough, a few seconds after I passed him, I saw the flashing lights in my rear view and pulled over. The cruiser parked behind me. The officer got out and walked up to my car. I could see him in the mirror. I rolled down the window. He asked for my license and registration. I gave them to him. He stood shining his mag light at the license, then at my face. He shined the light into the back seat, on the skis and the bicycle and the garbage bags full of clothes. Stephen Stroh, he read from the license. Do you know why I stopped you? I have a headlight out. That's probably it, I said. That is correct, he said. He stepped back and looked at the license plate and shined his light back on the collection of things in the back seat. Then he walked back to my window. Okay, just wait here a few minutes. I'll be right back, he said, and he walked back to his cruiser. I could see his face by the interior light in the cruiser. I waited. I could see he was talking on the radio. I hadn't done anything except had a light out, so I wasn't worried. But then again, I didn't know what to expect. Then he was writing on something. He was probably going to give me a ticket. He got out of his car and came back to my window. You driving all the way from New Hampshire? He asked. Yes, sir, I said. I see, he said, nodding his head slightly. I'm going to give you a fix-it tag for the headlight. There's no penalty, but you have to fix the light and mail this in with a receipt by December 31st. After that date, there will be a small penalty. He handed it to me. So, New Hampshire, when did you start out? He asked. I left a few days before Thanksgiving, stayed a few days in Kentucky at my brother's house. Now I'm going to San Francisco to my other brother's house for Christmas, I said. I see. You ski? He asked. Yes, sir. I'm trying to learn how to telemark, but I'm not so good at it yet, I said. I asked him if it would be okay if I got out of the car to stretch. He said that would be okay. I got out, stretched, and yawned. He asked me more about skiing. Turned out that he liked skiing too. So it ended up that he and I chatted for about 20 minutes while leaning on the fender in the Arizona night. He asked how far I planned to drive that night. I told him I'd get a motel once I crossed into California, and that I'd fix the light in the morning. You know, on second thought, don't worry about that ticket. Just fix it when you can, he said. After that, I got back on my way. I was glad that encounter had gone as well as it had. Just a few miles later, I crossed into California. California, first time in my life. Everywhere west of Louisville had been the first time in my life, but California felt different. This was the goal state. I don't know how much elevation the road had lost in coming down from the Coconino Plateau, but it was noticeably warmer once I crossed the state line. Just into the state, I had to pull over for an agricultural inspection. It looked like it was a modified truck weigh station. The sign said all vehicles had to stop. It was like going into Canada. An officer of some state agency asked me questions while another walked around my car, shining a light into the wheel wells. Then she looked into the back seat with her light. She asked if in New Hampshire the bicycle had been stored indoors or outdoors. I told her I had kept it in my parents' garage. She wanted to take a closer look. She said that they were very concerned about gypsy moth egg cases in vehicles from the east. It had not occurred to me, but the previous summer there had indeed been a severe infestation of gypsy moths in New Hampshire. She looked around and then told the other officer that she hadn't found anything. I was allowed to enter the state of California. Okay, and here's the picture that goes along with that. And actually, you might have noticed over my shoulder, here's the original of that picture up there. That's gonna, anyway, that's the original. Okay, so right now that picture's on page 134. So here we go. There was a motel in Needles, the first town on I-40, but I wanted to push on further. On the map, it looked like I could get to Barstow before too long. I drove onward through the Mojave Desert. I remember seeing the blue runway lights of a small airport off to the left. They were beautiful. Their deep color reminded me of Christmas lights. I remember thinking at the time that I would remember those lights many years later, and so it is. Here I am. I remember them. I also remember rolling down my window, feeling the desert air on my face. It was cool, not cold. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, a pleasant piney, and another smell like lavender, but wilder. Was it desert sage? I didn't know. After Needles and after the blue airport lights, the land was free of evidence of human habitation, except for the road. The moon was high and full. The desert land glowed gray in the moonlight. I was a little surprised, because even though this was the middle of the Mojave Desert, there appeared to be a thin overcast which seemed to amplify, or at least distribute, the light of the moon. That I only had one working headlight probably enhanced my night vision as well. I remember thinking of the song Hotel California. On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair. Literally. I might have even actually begun to sing it. It fit the scene so well. I don't know what time it was when I reached Barstow, maybe midnight. There were motels, but I wasn't tired. I kept on driving. There were signs for the exit to Interstate 15 to Los Angeles. I realized that I was then closer to Los Angeles than I was to Needles. I decided to tough it out and drive through the night to Los Angeles, find my way to the ocean, and find a place to sleep when I got there. Somewhere in the suburbs of Los Angeles, I got off the highway to fill up with gas. I found a 24-hour self-serve gas station and filled up the tank. When I went to pay, the attendant, a young man about my age, was sleeping in the booth behind the window, his face tucked into his elbow on the counter. I knocked on the glass and talked into the microphone, but he wouldn't wake up. He didn't look dead, not that I'd know, but he wouldn't wake up even when I was pounding on the glass. I knew that driving off without paying would be a very bad mistake. Even in those days, they must have had security cameras. Then, finally, I got him to stir, and he woke up. He seemed irritated that I had interrupted his sleep, probably thinking, "What kind of an idiot wakes me up to pay? Well, if the fool wants to give me his money." I paid and got back on I-15, and from there followed the signs to Los Angeles. Once in the city, I just followed the signs that I thought would lead to the ocean. There was one twisty interchange where I drove into a thick fog. It came on so sudden that I wondered if it was actually fog or some other strange meteorological phenomenon. With only one headlight, I could hardly see the line on the road. I had to go slow, so slow that I worried a truck might ram me from behind. There was no shoulder, and even if there was, I wouldn't have stopped. I just had to follow the road as well as I could and watch for taillights ahead. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the fog disappeared. I did not know anything about Los Angeles, and I was tired, but I could follow the signs. Pat Wrigley had told me about Venice Beach. She said that Jim Morrison used to hang out there. I would look for signs to Venice Beach. From there, I knew I could follow the coast up to San Francisco without a map. It must have been around 3 in the morning. I had figured that I would be able to make it to the coast, then I could sleep. But that's not what happened. Suddenly, I got a wave of sleepiness coming down over me. I had to struggle to keep my eyes open. I shook my head to keep awake. That would work for about a minute before I had to do it again. Then it wasn't working at all. I had to pull over somewhere immediately. I found a big parking lot that looked like I might be able to sleep without being bothered. It was a big, empty, unlit parking lot in front of a long, low, old-looking building with vaguely Spanish-looking architecture, arched doorways, and a fake tile roof. Did it have a tile roof? I don't remember. I parked, reclined my seat as far as it would go, and was out cold in an instant. It couldn't have been more than a couple hours later that I awoke in bright sunshine and summer-like heat, and in the middle of a throng. It was a wholesale produce market. There were hundreds of people walking by, pushing and pulling carts. A guy drove by on a forklift, all of them having to weave their way around my car. Strangely, nobody bothered me. I was the only car near me. There were vendors' stalls and tents set up, and there I was, this one car with New Hampshire plates all loaded up with a bicycle and skis in the back, with a guy sleeping in the front seat. I sat up and looked around. A lady carrying a box of cantaloupes on her head smiled and waved to me. I got out and stretched. There were all kinds of people going by, looking like they came from all over the world, all talking and laughing. It was like a festival. I asked a lady what was going on. She explained in an amazing accent that this was the biggest produce market in the city. People who ran restaurants and grocery stores came here every morning. "Do you drive here all the way from New Hampshire?" she asked. I told her I had. She said she was from Haiti. She and her family ran a Haitian restaurant. She was very friendly. Nobody told me I had to move my car. I would have expected somebody to do that. I asked somebody how to get to the beach, and they gave me directions. I forgot what roads I took, but I finally did get to the ocean. From there, I just took a right and headed north. I followed the coast, going through famous movie star towns like Malibu and Santa Barbara. I needed to sleep again. I was looking for a place to pull over when I got stopped by another cop. This one asked if I had been drinking. I told him that I had not, but that I'd been driving since Flagstaff, Arizona. New Hampshire plates and all. He asked where I was going, and I told him San Francisco. He was friendly enough, but told me I had to stop somewhere and sleep because it was at least an 8-hour drive. He let me go. I came up on Ventura Beach, where I found an empty beachside parking lot. I parked in the shade of palm trees, got out, took my sneakers off, and walked out onto the beach, Ventura Beach. It was famous, and I suppose this time of year must have been off-season because I was the only one there. I walked out to the edge of the water and let the water roll up onto my feet. I rolled up my pant legs and stepped out a little further. The surf was calm, just gentle little waves rolling in. I could feel the sand being swept from under my heels as the water rushed back between waves. I had always loved that feeling when I'd gone to Hampton Beach in New Hampshire. Now I was in California, Ventura Beach, driving on the Ventura Highway. The water was cold, but the air was warm. I went back to the car and slept for a few hours. Interstate 5 would have been the fastest route to San Francisco. I knew that, but the traffic would be heavier now, and my car could not go as fast as the stream of traffic would be on that route. I decided I would take Route 1, the coast route. It followed the ocean the whole way. Matthew had told me that the Big Sur coast is something to see, so I looked forward to seeing it. I woke up to find the car too hot to sleep, but I had slept some. I felt okay. I figured that I could make it to San Francisco today if I left now. I stopped at a McDonald's and got an Egg McMuffin and a coffee and started driving. I no longer cared about being a cup-carrying Circle K Coffee Club member. As I got past the Los Angeles suburbs, the view became more and more beautiful. It was December already, and the hills were green with fresh grass, dark forest in the higher slopes of the coast mountains. Eucalyptus trees lined the road. I have never forgotten that distinctive and wonderful smell and the wild look of their long leaves and peeling bark. Just a second, I take a sip of coffee here. Okay. San Simeon, Hearst Castle up ahead. There it was, gleaming white buildings, a tower like a Spanish mission, the sun glinting off upper story windows. It was beautiful, almost magical. It was a real part of history, real life Citizen Kane. Here's the picture. This is my painting of that would be Hearst Castle up in the hills there. Okay. I knew, even then, about William Randolph Hearst. I had learned the term yellow journalism in high school, not from the teachers, but from Chuck Lombardi. He had told me of Hearst's promotion through his newspaper empire of the Spanish-American War and the subsequent American pursuit of empire in the spoils of that war. It was Chuck who also referred me to Mark Twain's 1901 essay, To the Person Sitting in Darkness, which detailed atrocities committed by American troops in the Philippines. In one part, Twain quoted letters of American soldiers writing to their families back home. One, I remember, bragging about putting his bayonet, the soldiers called it the long spoon, down the throats of unarmed, bound people. I wondered why our teachers in school had made no mention that such an icon of American culture had, in his later years, actually been a strident critic of American policy. How had Chuck Lombardi known? It occurred to me at the time, while I was driving past San Simeon, how many times on this trip across America I had asked myself, on how many topics, if our teachers had not known. Had they not known about the coup d'etat that had ousted Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran, that led to the installation of the Shah, whose rule was so ghastly that he was ousted in the 1979 revolution? How was it that Chuck Lombardi had known of these things? Why had neither the news nor our teachers in 1979 ever mentioned that? It seemed to me that if the kids in that high school pep rally had known of the coup, had known why the Iranians were angry at the Americans, they might not have chanted so menacingly as they had. That brought me back to Sympathy for the Devil. That song could go on forever with a litany of tragic events in history, showing the irony that keeping a nation's people ignorant of the dark sides of their own history could somehow be seen as beneficial to the nation. I was there when Reagan said that Vietnam was a noble cause. I shouted out, "Who? Who?" I sang to myself to the tune, trying to think up the next line. That's why I think that song is profound, Dad. I said it out loud. Hearst Castle disappeared in the distance. As I drove north, the mountains edged closer and closer to the sea until Route 1 was a winding asphalt ribbon carved out of their very sides. The sun shined. I drove with the windows open, the wind cool and steady off the water, whitecaps rolling ashore, smashing on the rocks just yards below. I could smell the salt spray. Sometimes the road curved such that I could not see the shore beneath the guardrail, only water. But that was a little scary. In the distance, the deep blue Pacific faded into white haze on the horizon. Ahead, rows of mountains sloped down to the surf, their rocky crests disappearing into the waves, one after another, as far as I could see. Okay, now here's a picture of that. The California coast, driving on Route 1 north, probably just between Hearst Castle and Big Sur somewhere. Okay. And so that's right. The forest became thicker in the valleys between the ridges, with tall, dark redwood trees. These were redwood trees, the first time I'd seen them. I knew they had to be. This spectacular scenery went on for hours. In the afternoon, there was a sign for a campground ahead, Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park. I decided to stop for the day. There were only a few other people at the campground. The attendant said I could drive around and choose any site I wanted, then come back and tell him which one it was. I chose a site deep in a redwood grove. I went back to let him know, got food and beer at the store, went back and pitched my tent. This was California. Would it be safe to leave my campsite unattended? I had never considered that in New Hampshire. But what of mine would anybody want to steal? My tent? Probably not. Bicycle? Probably not. Skis? Cross country? Definitely not. Beer? Yes, but whatever. A hiking trail led back to the road. I put 2 cans in my pockets and followed it to the road, and on the other side followed a path to a rocky bluff overlooking the sea. The stiff wind off the ocean was refreshing. I cracked open a can, raised it in cheers to myself, and took a deep swig. The trees, stunted and gnarled, some kind of juniper, roots anchored in crevices in the rocks, only their top branches still alive, skeletal arms extended level, bristly green fingers all pointing ashore as if to warn passers-by to go back, not to do what we have done. I would later learn that these were Monterey cypress, that they are native to just a small area along the coast here. The sun was going down. Yellow light bathed the rocks. A squadron of pelicans skimmed just above the water below me in perfect formation, avian Spitfires patrolling the Dover coast. I had made it to California. Tomorrow I would arrive in San Francisco. I remembered the day that I learned that I would not be graduating with my high school class. Just 1 credit short. I had failed 1 too many classes. Satire with Mrs. Collins. That was the class. I remember standing on the screened porch in front of I remember standing on the screened-in porch of our house in New Hampshire that day with my mother. That miserable school bus ride home, the ride that should have been the last one of my life. I knew my mother was going to hit the roof. I dreaded the inevitable. I had to tell her. There was nothing else I could do. But when I did tell her, out on the screened-in porch, she was not angry. She hugged me, then faced me with her hands on my shoulders and looked into my eyes. She said that if I didn't want to go back to school, I didn't have to go anymore. It would be okay. I still think of that moment. My mother's words were the same, only grammatically correct, as the line in the Grateful Dead song, Here Comes Sunshine. The line, you just don't have to go no more, no more. I thanked my mother for her kindness, but told her that no, I did have to go back. I only needed 1 credit. I could take 2 half-credit courses at summer school. I told her I would do that. As it turned out, New Dartford High didn't offer any classes I wanted to take in summer school. I found that Nashua High School had more choices. I signed up for 2 classes there. Nashua High was about 20 miles from our house. That's right, I would ride my bicycle. I was an enthusiastic cyclist in those days. On the first day of those classes, it took a little over an hour to get to Nashua High. I was on time. This would be doable. I told myself. I locked my bike, got my bag, and stood in line with the other kids waiting for the door to be unlocked. Then, just a few feet up the line from me, a fight broke out. I didn't know what the problem was, but the 2 boys started pushing each other. Then they started punching each other. After just a few punches, it became a one-sided fight. One guy just punching the other. Then he got the boy in a headlock and punched. Kids gathering, shouting, "Fight, fight, fight!" jeering the loser until he flopped on the ground. The winner stood over the boy, the crowd begging for more. He gave one more kick to the face, then strutted off, puffed up in victory, the crowd adoring. The loser lay silent, writhing in slow motion, his face smeared with blood as he covered the welts on his forehead with his hands, dried grass sticking to the blood. The spectators spewing scorn as they left to enter the building. A lone teacher came out to help him. I had seen fights before at New Dartford High, but nothing as brutal as this. I did not want to go to this school. I walked back to my bicycle and rode home. I ended up taking 2 half-credit courses in the fall at New Dartford High, the first semester of the regular school year. At the end of that semester, age 19, I got my high school diploma. Still technically class of 81. My mother was still alive to see that. Back at Big Sur, I watched the sunset until its last golden sliver disappeared on the horizon. The slow rhythm of the surf, the salt air on my face. I felt another tremble like I had in the restaurant in Kansas. Was I happy? Yes. What was going on in my mind? I realized that I could have made it to San Francisco this night. When I saw the campground, I stopped. Why? I had not planned to stop. It was the same reason why I had stopped in Columbus, Ohio, wasn't it? I wasn't ready to face my brothers. Why? What was that about? I suppose it was because I really didn't know what I was doing. I was driving across the country. That was the immediate thing I was doing at the time. I suppose I believed that I would have been expected to have an explanation of what my long-term goals were, and I didn't have one. So I feared that I might become cornered in a conversation, and that would lead to an uncomfortable scene. Logically, I knew that my brothers would not have any particular requirements of me. They weren't going to interrogate me, but I was nervous for some reason. I suppose that is why I stopped in Columbus, and then here in Big Sur. I wanted to gather my thoughts in preparation for seeing my brothers. I went back to the campground and set up the lantern, made dinner, drank beer for a while, and then went to bed. The next morning, I slept late. The tent was in the shade of the redwoods and did not get too hot. I must have been tired from driving through the night from Flagstaff, and I hadn't really slept properly in the car. I had slept well in the tent. I got up and made coffee. I knew it wasn't too far to San Francisco now, so I took my time. I left just before the checkout time for the campground. I drove north toward Monterey, and then took Route 101 past Salinas, up toward San Jose. Salinas, me and Bobby McGee. Then somewhere near Salinas, Lord, I let him slip away. He's searching for that home, and I hope he finds it. Having no radio, the song just came to my mind. I asked myself, was that me? It was getting to be rush hour when I got to Menlo Park. I remember Menlo Park because I had not known that there was a Menlo Park, California. I knew of Menlo Park, New Jersey, because that was where Thomas Edison had his shop. The traffic was slow, which suited my car. I went past at the exit for San Francisco International Airport. Then, up ahead on the left, on a hillside, big letters spelled out, South San Francisco, the industrial city. Okay, that's the end of chapter 9. So that's page 148. So next time will be chapter 10, San Francisco. And that'll be on page 149. Okay, have a good day.